Before Noah's flood, before the great judgment, before the world was destroyed and remade, something happened, something the Bible mentions only in 2 verses, something so disturbing, so controversial that entire books were written about it, and then hidden. In Genesis chapter 6, just before God decides to wipe out all life on earth, there is a passage that most people skip over. It reads almost like a footnote, but what it describes is one of the most terrifying events in the entire Bible. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, sons of God, Nephilim, giants. These words have haunted scholars, theologians, and historians for thousands of years. Who were the sons of God? Why did their offspring become giants? And what does any of this have to do with the total destruction of the world? Who were the Watchers? The answer begins not in Genesis, but in a book that was almost erased from history entirely. The Book of Enoch, written somewhere between the 3rd and 1st centuries BC. This ancient Jewish text was known, quoted, and referenced by early Christians, including the Apostle Jude in the New Testament. And yet it was eventually excluded from the Bible, hidden, forgotten, rediscovered only in 1773 in the mountains of Ethiopia. And what does Enoch say? It says that, before the flood, a group of powerful angelic beings, called the Watchers, descended to earth, not to serve God, not to deliver a message. They came because of desire, because they looked at human women, and they wanted them. The Book of Enoch names their leader, Semyaza, and it names 200 of them who made a pact, a dark, deliberate oath, on Mount Hermon. They swore that none of them would back out. They would all descend together, and they would take human wives. This is why they are called the Watchers. It was their original purpose, to watch over humanity, to observe, to guard. They were not fallen by nature, they fell by choice. And that choice changed everything. The Nephilim, children of angels. The offspring of the Watchers and human women were called the Nephilim, a Hebrew word that likely means the fallen ones or those who cause others to fall. And they were giants, not metaphorically. Physically enormous, terrifyingly powerful beings who walked the earth before the flood. But they were also something far more disturbing than just large humans. According to Enoch, they were hybrids, part human, part something else. Their appetites were insatiable. They consumed everything, animals, crops, and eventually turned on each other. They filled the earth with violence. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This is the context for Noah's flood. God did not destroy the world because humans were merely sinful. The whole fabric of creation had been corrupted. The genetic, spiritual, and moral line between the human and the divine had been violated. Something irreversible had been set in motion. But the Watchers also did something else, something perhaps even more dangerous. They taught humanity forbidden knowledge. The Book of Enoch lists in detail what each of the Watchers taught humanity. And the list is remarkable. One Watcher named Azazel taught men how to make swords, shields, and armor, the art of war. He taught women the secrets of cosmetics, jewelry, and the beautifying of eyelids, the art of seduction. Other watchers taught enchantment, sorcery, astrology, the cutting of roots, and the reading of the stars. Knowledge that humanity was not yet prepared to handle. Knowledge that in the hands of a violent, corrupted species became a weapon. Think about what this means. Before the flood, humanity was not primitive and ignorant. They were advanced, supernaturally tutored in arts, warfare, and dark mysticism, and they used every bit of it to destroy one another. The archangel Raphael was sent by God with a specific task: bind Azazel, hand and foot, cast him into the darkness of the desert, cover him with rough, jagged rocks, and leave him there until the day of judgment. Book of Enoch 10:4-6. Bind Azazel, hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and cover his face that he may not see the light. And on the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. As for the Nephilim, the giant offspring, God did not simply destroy them in the flood. Their bodies died, but their spirits remained. And according to Enoch, those spirits became what we now call evil spirits, demons wandering the earth without flesh, without peace, until the end of time. Now, not everyone accepts this interpretation. There are three major views on who the sons of God in Genesis 6 actually were, and each one changes the entire picture. View 1. The angel view. This is the oldest interpretation, held by ancient Jewish writers, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and early church fathers like Justin Martyr and Tertullian. The sons of God were fallen angels who physically descended and produced supernatural offspring with human women. This view takes Genesis and Enoch literally. View 2. The Sethite view, popularized in the 4th century AD. This view says the sons of God were simply the godly line of Seth, Adam's righteous descendants, who intermarried with the ungodly descendants of Cain. The giants were only giants in wickedness, not in body. This is the safest, most conservative view. View 3. The ruler view. In this interpretation, the sons of God were powerful human kings or rulers, perhaps claiming divine status, who abused their power and took women by force. The Nephilim were their mighty, tyrannical descendants. Each view has serious scholars behind it. But notice, only one of them explains why God's response was so extreme. Why total annihilation? If the problem was merely intermarriage between two human groups, why destroy the entire world? Why save only Noah, described as perfect in his generations? That phrase, perfect in his generations, in Hebrew implies purity of lineage. Noah was saved not only because of his righteousness, but because his bloodline had not been corrupted. It was pure, human, uncontaminated. Here is something most people miss. The New Testament references the Watchers, not once, but multiple times, and it treats them as completely literal. Jude 1:6, and the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. 2 Peter 2:4, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved for judgment. Angels who sinned, angels who left their proper domain, angels in chains in darkness, waiting for judgment. This is not metaphor. This is the New Testament describing, in explicit terms, exactly what Enoch described centuries earlier. beings who crossed a line they were never meant to cross. And then there is Jesus himself. In Matthew 24, when asked about the signs of the end of the world, Jesus says, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." As it was in the days of Noah. Not just the moral corruption, not just the violence, the entire picture, the watchers, the Nephilim, the forbidden knowledge, the mixing of what should not be mixed. Jesus is saying, it will happen again. So what do we do with all of this? Whether you believe the watchers were literal angels, metaphorical kings, or something in between, the story of Genesis 6 carries a warning that echoes through every age of human history. When powerful beings, whether spiritual or human, abandon their purpose and use their power for desire and domination, the world fills with violence. Knowledge without wisdom destroys. Boundaries that God set are not arbitrary. They protect. And when they are crossed, the consequences are catastrophic. Noah was not saved because he was perfect. He was saved because in a world that had been completely overrun, he still chose to walk with God. In a generation of absolute corruption, one man stayed faithful, and God remembered him. The watchers fell because they chose to look at the wrong thing. Noah was saved because he kept his eyes on the right one. The Book of Enoch ends its account of the watchers with a strange and haunting image. Semyaza, the leader of the fallen angels, is bound in the stars, held in place in the constellation Orion, until the final judgment, watching the world he destroyed, unable to act, unable to escape. Some choices once made cannot be undone. Some lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. The watchers knew what they were doing. They chose desire over purpose, power over obedience, and they have been paying for it ever since. If this story moved you, if it made you see Genesis 6 differently, share it with someone. The Bible is full of hidden stories, forgotten truths, and mysteries that most people never encounter. Subscribe to this channel, and we will find them together.